very special edition of Raw TV, Real and Willing Television. I'm Corey Lovett.
And I'm Andrew Harley. Now, for those of you who watch the show, you know that me and Corey aren't usually holding babies on the set. But tonight we brought these little guys on. They're our new best friends, by the way. We brought them on because we're talking about a very, very special gift from God. We're talking about adoption.
Now, for those of us who are believers, we all know what it's like to be adopted, at least into the family of God. So that's a spiritual sense. But we're going to meet a special couple tonight, Roxanne and Steve, who are going to share how that spiritual principle really played out in a tangible way in their lives.
Welcome back. We really learned a lot from that piece on adoption, so those are some great stories. And to hear more stories, we have on our set the parents of Nathan and Ethan. This is Steve and Roxanne. So
Welcome
guys,
to
thanks
the
so much for
show.
coming.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you for bringing those precious boys and trusting us to hold them.
I have a new respect for Steve. I was just trying to
It was
chill.
an arm workout, too. Well, let's get right into your story. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to the decision to adopt?
I think adoption has kind of always been on my heart. Like, I always said if I can't have my own kids, I would adopt. And then we kind of got the news that we couldn't have our own kids. And so then we were like, okay, well then we'll do adoption. But then when we actually sat down and researched it, it was really scary because we didn't really know how to go about it. And I was doing all this research, and my fear, you know, like you see in the media, is you're gonna get this kid and they're gonna grow up to hate you because their parents abandoned them and all this stuff. So I just had all these negative feelings about adoption, and I just wasn't at peace with it. So I was like, okay, we're not doing adoption. And I didn't want to look into all the fertilization stuff and all that because that scared me. But after I kind of ruled out adoption, I was like, well, maybe we could do this. So I started looking into that, and that scared me even more. I was like, I'm not doing this. And one of my students had in one of the meetings, it came out that she was adopted, and I was like, "You're not adopted," and she's like, "Yeah, I am," and I'm like, "But you're normal, you know." I'm like, "There's nothing wrong with you. You're
There's
a
nothing
great
about
kid."
that, like a stereotype.
Yeah, exactly. And it never occurred to me until that moment that I could adopt a child. It would be perfectly, you know, appreciate the fact that they were adopted, that somebody took them in. And so at that point, I mean, it was instant. It was just like, okay, I can do this
And
now.
you had peace.
Yeah, total peace.
Steve, what was your thought process? I mean, we heard Roxanne had a lot of anxiety about it. How did you feel throughout the?
You know, honestly, it is kind of one of those things that I had always thought if we could adopt that I'd like to. But for me, it just became more of a reality, you know, after finding out that we couldn't have our kids, our natural kids, that, you know, that I was fine with it. And quite honestly, us going on some missions trip and supporting some girls in Thailand that we do through our friends' ministry, I really felt like this was definitely something that we could do, and more so not just about us, but about the kids. And so, you know, it really, as far as the idea of it, wasn't all that scary, but once we started the process, it became a little bit more intimidating by all means.
Yeah, you're always scared of the unknown. So that for us, it was like, we have no idea what we're getting into, but we're going to forge ahead.
So what was, you know, you mentioned that, you know, you found out you couldn't have your own kids. You know, what was the healing process like for y'all as a couple to get past that and be able to view adoption, you know, after the healing? What was the healing like, though?
I'm one of those people that, you know, my whole life, everything is kind of worked out. You know, I went to college, nobody in my family graduated from college, and I, you know, got married, and then, you know, I was like, in 5 years we're going to have kids, and then at 3 years we kind of felt like we wanted to start that process. And so that just didn't happen. And so when we finally like, let's find out what's going on, and then we found out we couldn't have kids, and it's like you go through this mourning because you almost feel guilty. Like, that's how I felt. I felt like I should be able to have kids. You know, this is not normal, and I felt ashamed almost.
Yeah.
Like people were gonna look at me like, oh, you know. And so for us, for me especially, I just felt like I had to mourn not having kids, you know. And so there was just that process of, like, I had to get to where I was like, you know what, Lord, whatever you want for us, as far however we're going to have kids, then I'm just going to trust you. And for me, it was either I'm just going to wait and you're going to fix everything and it's going to be fine, or you're going to lead us in another direction. And so that was just like, I finally had a peace about that.
Would you say that, you know, it can be a calling for people to adopt? Because obviously God was preparing your heart long before you knew that you wouldn't have your own biological children. So would you agree with that, and what's your take on that in your own life?
I didn't realize that till like now. Like, all growing up, my parents always had people living with us. Just taking people in from the church or just family members, cousins, always had them living with us. And I was like, I am never gonna have people live with me, you know, ever, because they take away from me. So I was always mad at my parents. But we got married, and when we first bought our house, you know, we had a friend who needed a place to live, and we took him in. And we've had how many people live in our house?
Emery had said the other day, like 6. We counted it up the other day. At some point or another, that have lived there for a short period of time. And, you know, it was just one of those things that, you know, you don't really realize how all of those things play into the bigger picture. And so we just had friends or family members that we felt that we could help out in a period of time that we couldn't do other things. We couldn't financially support or other things, but we could, you know, at least do that.
Right.
And so it was just one of those things that it made adoption just feel
Right.
natural, you
It's
know,
in our
just
blood.
to go ahead and
Yeah, it's in your blood for sure.
Yeah.
definitely.
That's awesome. Well, what was, just for you guys, the miracle of getting Ethan and Nathan? Let's talk
They're
about
so
them.
precious.
When you guys did get to adopt, just tell us the story of your sons and your family.
When we finally, you know, picked the agency that we did, they were very, very thorough in the process. So that kind
Private
of
agency?
Yeah, that kind of relieved us of our fears, because they had everything
Good.
lined out, all the paperwork, everything. It
Good.
was just pretty much, here's what you need to do, and, you know, sign papers and stuff. And the way that ours worked is the birth mother picks you out. So you have to write up this whole profile about yourselves, and you
Wow.
write a letter to the birth mom telling about your family and why you wanted to adopt. And then they post you on this website, and birth mothers go and they click and they find you. And for me, I was like, you know what, Lord? I was like, whoever the birth mother is, let her feel like this is the couple I want. Let her feel drawn to us. And a month later, we got a call.
That's fast, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, like the normal agency's probably
4 to 9 months, and we were
Wow.
a month later. And so they called us with the baby, and the birth mom, she's like, she wants you guys. She's like really adamant about wanting you guys. And for that, to me, that was like the first confirmation, because that's what I had prayed about. We wanted a boy. We would have taken a girl or boy, but our heart, we just really wanted a boy. Ethan, our first, he's the same nationality as both of us. I'm Puerto Rican, and Steve's German. And
He looks just like you.
so
It's outrageous.
yeah. But there were just so many things that lined up, and so we knew that God was starting a miracle in our lives and in Ethan's life.
Well, speaking of miracle, and I want you to share with people why Ethan is such a miracle, what the situation was when he was born.
Ethan's birth mother, she was a drug addict, and her whole family's drug addicts, so she was kind of born into it. But on the adoption forms that you fill out, you kind of answer questions about what you want and don't want, and one of the things was like, we don't want anything to do with drugs. And they called us and they said, look, it's really rare these days that you're going to get a healthy teenage mom who she's too young to have kids, so she wants to give it up. Most women, they're like, they don't just give up their babies because they're like, I don't think I'll give up my baby.
It's a desperate situation.
nobody gives up their child that's in a good situation.
Right.
Right.
That they're just don't want to raise them. So for the large part, we were going to have to kind of cross that bridge. Not in every situation, but pretty close.
Yeah, and there's different stages. Like it could be they've never done drugs, or they've done drugs but when they were a teenager, those type of things. But our case, the birth mother came into the system so quickly, and she lied to the agency. And so she had said that, I did drugs, but I stopped at this point, 24 weeks, which is a long time.
Right.
But it turns out she was doing drugs throughout the whole pregnancy. She did drugs the day he was born. So when we got the test results, Ethan tested for how many drugs?
12 out of 15 that the hospital checked for. And so we were really concerned, not knowing long term what kind of effects that would
Damage,
have.
yeah.
And- but God really kind of gave us a peace over the situation. And I remember looking at Roxanne and saying that there's no way that I could abandon that child for the second time in one day. And so we just prayed about it and went forward. And I mean, it's a miracle that he's got no side effects, no
Hallelujah.
long-term, nothing. I mean, you saw earlier, he's a happy baby.
That's great.
And, we just thank God.
That's amazing.
Yeah, hallelujah.
Wow.
That's
Well,
powerful.
right now we're actually going to take a break and check out a video by Mike's Chair. It's called Let the Waters Rise. We hope you enjoy it.
Don't know where to begin. It's like my world's caving in, and I try but I can't control my fear. Where do I go from here? Sometimes it's so hard to pray when you feel so far away, but I am willing to go where you want me to. God, I trust you. There's a raging sea right in front of me, wants to pull me in, bring me to my knees. So let the waters rise if you want them to. I will follow you, I will follow you. I will follow you. I will swim in the deep, 'cause you'll be next to me. You're in the eye of the storm and the calm of the sea. You're never out of reach. God, you know where I've been, and you were there with me then. You were faithful before, you'll be faithful again. I'm holding your hand. There's a raging sea right in front of me, wants to pull me in, bring me to my knees. So let the waters rise if you want them to. I will follow you, I will follow you. I will follow belong to you. And God, your love is enough. I will follow you. I will follow you. There's a raging sea right in front of me, wants to pull me in, bring me to my knees. So let the waters rise if you want them to. I will follow you. I will follow you. I will follow you.
That last video really showed how you can follow the Lord no matter the circumstance. Now,
That's
Roxanne
right.
and Steve, how did that play out in your spiritual journey with just trusting the Lord?
This whole experience has changed my life forever spiritually. When we walked into that room and saw our son tied up, you know, connected to all these machines, not at that point not even knowing if we were going to go through with it, because our agency, they promise you a healthy baby. So at that point, if there's something wrong, you can walk away. So we had a huge decision to make because we were not expecting that. You know, you walk into the room thinking you're going to watch your son's birth, and you know, you get told that they took the baby, he's having complications, and he tested positive for cocaine. And you're like, that's not what I was expecting. You know, and even at that moment, like God was working in me because I'm the type of person that I'll just be like, I want to kill this woman. But my first words were, are you okay? And I'm asking this lady who just did drugs, you know, it could have killed our baby if she's okay. And that was totally a God thing because, I mean, I was concerned for her, and it was in my head, I was like, this is all she knows, you know, and the smartest thing she could ever do is give up her baby. So watching our son struggle there, it was at that point, I was like, Lord, you need to tell me yes or no. If I say no, am I going to be able to live with the fact that I walked away from this baby that could have been ours? And if you say yes, I need to know that I can take care of a baby that I have no idea what kind of problems they're going to have. And so it was a yes or no, Lord, not like just stay quiet. I need you to say something. And so I'm just sitting there quiet, and I felt in my spirit the Lord say everything's going to be fine. And so at that point, it was just waiting for, you know, Steve to get to that point. So I just sat quietly and kind of waited for him to process, you know. And so from then on, it was just really letting the Lord lead us in faith. And just like at that point, I was like, this is my son. No matter what happens, you know, whether he has disabilities or not, this is my son. So for me, I mean, it's a miracle. And you look at, you know, from where he started, he was on morphine and detox and all that. We had no idea. And my son is, you know, yeah. So, I mean,
so
it is a
beautiful.
miracle. His life is a miracle, and how we got him was a miracle. So, I don't know if you want to share.
What about with Nathan? How did the, you know, progression towards getting Nathan?
You know, it's kind of funny is that it doesn't seem like God gives us much time to make any decisions. From Roxanne said, you know, we had
Especially the big ones, right?
Yeah,
Right.
we had a month before we were matched with Nathan or with Ethan, and then from the time we were matched to the time he was in our home or was born was a week and a half. And with Nathan, you know, it was a little bit of a different situation. We were thinking about starting the process of adoption again, and someone that I know and work with, his sister was in a situation where she was going to be having a baby and wasn't going to be able to keep him. And so we were talking at lunch, and you know, he was just asking questions because we had gone through the adoption process. And I went home that day and I told Roxanne, I said, look, somebody from work is, their sister's giving a baby up from adoption, and they're trying to figure out what to do. I was like, what do you think
jokingly
about
was
it?
like, oh, let's just adopt him. Like, I was totally kidding. I was not even like
And
ready, you know?
Yeah. And so we we began to kind of try to work through the process. Again, being a private adoption, it was a little more onus on us and less on an agency. And it seemed like literally every step forward was several steps back until the day that Nathan was born. She wasn't really interested in us taking the baby. She was going to let this agency just come and pick him up. And Nathan's uncle was, constantly trying to help, move this plan along. And she called like the next day. I mean, it was the day that he was born, and I looked at Roxanne and I said, well, I guess it's not going to happen. And the next day she called her brother and said, look, if they want the baby, you all need to get to Georgia. So it was like a day. I mean, literally. And from the time that we kind of even heard what was going on was right before Christmas, and he was born on January 15th. I mean, so we literally, like, well, we're going to Atlanta today to pick up a baby. And so, but, to be honest with you, I don't think I'd have it any other way. I mean, they both are such great kids, and it's such a miracle to me that, I never thought that my life would be touched like that. You hear stories or you see things like that, and you asked earlier about the healing process, and I feel like the actual adoption itself was as much a part of that process, because to go through the battery of tests, and for us, it was an issue with me, and it's a very dehumanizing, humiliating experience, test after test, poking and prodding and things that the medical profession does to find out those things, and then to just come to that realization that you can't. And the moment that the adoption or that you are there with that child, it just kind of, that doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
It's
like
just
you're a
all
dad
gone.
now. Yeah.
Right, and
Yeah.
for me, that was the last time I thought about it, was we were there to pick up Ethan, and we were dealing obviously with other circumstances and for many, many days afterwards, but it was like, that didn't matter anymore. This was my son, and that's it. It's a done deal.
Yeah.
And the same thing for Nathan. The experience is a little different, but it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, for me, I was at a point where I was really questioning miracles. Like, God, why don't you do miracles like you used to do in the Bible? I don't see that anymore. I really want to see that. And to go from questioning that to being a part of a miracle, and for God to, just everything that happened, there's no denying. My sons were protected in the womb when there was drugs in their system, both of them. And they're perfectly healthy kids. And, who knows what could have happened to them. But God, destined this to happen. And he made it very clear
Obviously,
to us
yeah.
that.
I mean, there's so many things in the story
Right.
that just line up.
And so I got 2 miracles, so.
So beautiful.
Now, how would you say, like, for anybody out there, like, how can someone tell, like, if they're called to adopt, or if there's someone who should really think about or consider adoption?
Or consider, choosing adoption as the plan for them if they're
for
pregnant.
their own child.
Right. There's a lot of misconceptions about adoption and things like what I talked about, or just wondering if I'm going to get a kid that's going to, reject us or whatever. But most kids who are adopted are really appreciative that they're adopted. They really do go to good families, and so they're happy. That's how they were supposed to
Yeah.
grow
Normal
up.
kids, yeah.
And on the flip side, mothers who are contemplating giving up their child, there's a guilt there. So they'd rather abort their baby than have to live with the guilt of knowing, that they had to give them up, and what are their babies going to think about them? I didn't love them, that kind of thing. And that's really not true. There's actually, the laws have changed so much, they protect both sides. So like in our adoption, but with both birth moms, like we have to send pictures to them and letters and let them know how they're doing their whole life until they're 18. And so they're still a part of it, and knowing, I think, for them that their kids are in good hands, that's kind of a relief. So even though they're not a part of their lives, at least they know, I made the best choice I could for them.
That was the loving thing to do.
Right.
And I want to make sure that we say this and that it's understood, is that, look, because someone gives their child up for adoption, look, that doesn't mean that they're a bad person.
No.
It means they're in a bad place or a bad situation, and they're making the best decision that they can for that child's life. And so, for me, had those two mothers not been able to say, look, I can't provide, but there is someone that can, we wouldn't have kids. We wouldn't have this opportunity.
Right.
And so, I quite honestly, I don't know how I could ever be as brave as those
It is
mothers to
very
be
brave
able to
decision.
say,
It's a good way to see it.
this is my child and I can't take care of them,
Wow.
but I want the best. I mean, regardless of whether you're in drugs or anything else, that's just a very powerful moment to be able to have the
It's very
bravery to
touching
do
see it
that.
that way.
That's beautiful. Wow. Well, thank you so much for being with us.
Sure.
Your story is truly a miracle, and I hope that everyone has learned a lot from this. Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
And we hope that anybody, any of you guys out there who are considering adoption, will
Start the process.
Start the process, pray about it, think about it, and know that God still does miracles today.
Out of reach, God, you know where I've been. You were there with me then. You were faithful before, you'll be faithful again. I'm holding your hand. There's a raging sea right in front of me. Wants to pull me in, bring me to my knees. So let the waters rise if you want them to. I will follow you. I will follow you. I will follow you. God, your love is enough. You will pull me through. I'm holding on to you. God, your love